I'm here today with our Councillor Linda McPhail from the City of Richmond. I'm Florence Gordon, and we are going to do a brief introduction about the responsibilities today for the school trustees. Linda, I know you've been a councillor for some 11 years and well-liked, well-loved, but you also were a school trustee for 9 years, plus you were chair for 7 years of the Board of Trustees for the school board. And I wanted to ask you if you would share your knowledge with our viewers with regards to the responsibility that the trustees have towards the community and the children of this community. We have an election coming up in October, and I think it's really important that the voters out there understand the responsibilities, as well as the people that are running for school trustee, the responsibilities that are involved in taking care of the children, the schools, their budgets, everything encompassed underneath their responsibilities. Can you share that with our viewers, please?
Well, good morning, Florence, and thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be part of your production, and thanks for the opportunity to share. I was school trustee from 2002 until 2011, and 7 of those years I was the chairperson of the board. So, and I have to tell you, as I look back on my career in politics, being a school trustee was probably one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. I came to politics, someone said to me, "Oh, Linda, we think you'd be good," and I really hadn't, looked at politics, and so that got me interested, that someone thought that I might be good at it. And so I did run in 2002 for the first time, and I was elected. So I think, being a school trustee is very important. You represent your community, you represent families and children who live in your community, and I think there's no greater duty than to represent children and families, and especially those who could be vulnerable. As you know, school boards derive most of their funding from the province. Mm-hmm. Probably about 95% of their funding comes from the provincial government, and it comes in the form of per student funding. And then capital projects such as renovations or new schools, even heating, ventilation upgrades, that comes in a separate stream. So you have your per student funding and you have your capital project funding. And they can only be used, the capital funding must be used for capital projects. So depending on how many students you have in your district, you get funded for them. And really, it's up to the Board of Education to decide how that money is going to be spent. Now, about 95% of that goes toward teachers and educational assistants, specialist teachers, and of course your school board administration, the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, and all the other district employees that make the district run so smoothly. And we can't forget, we also have unionized employees, the school janitors, the school bus drivers. All that has to come out of your per student funding. So it is a big responsibility. Of course, you have staff who are experts in finance, in the educational system, who will help you come up with that. But at the end of the day, 7 school trustees in Richmond will decide on how that funding is spent. The 9 years that I was a school trustee, I think every year except one, we had to look at budget cuts. And that's very difficult. So then you're looking at, what can we cut out of a system? Mm-hmm. And with most of the budget going towards staff, most of those cuts would come from staff.
That's interesting, because our taxes that we pay to the City of Richmond, yes, do they get a portion of that as well from the city, or is...
No, I know, it's very confusing, and you find this out when you become involved, and like I did when I was elected. So the province sets your city taxes, the rate, mm-hmm, right? So that's set. The city then sets the tax rate. The province sets the school district taxes, And then there's other taxes too. But in the end, it is the city who collects the city taxes, the school district taxes, taxes that go to Metro Vancouver, and TransLink. So there's many different kinds of taxes. In Richmond, about 50% of the taxes are actually collected by the city for other bodies. So
Okay.
the city collects the money for the school districts. It goes to the province. The province then allocates it to school districts in that per student funding, which I spoke about earlier.
That's interesting because it gives myself, and of course our viewers, I hope they're listening to this, a better understanding because I didn't know this. I did know that the city was collecting, but never knew the breakdown that you've explained to us.
And it's always been, I think, challenging when you look at that, because you look at Richmond, 225,000 people, say, 20,000 students. So we collect a lot of money in school district taxes. And I know when I was a school trustee, we did a lot of calculations and looked at it. And we always were concerned about the equity and the distribution of the taxes, and really how it works. The larger cities, Richmond, Vancouver, Surrey, Burnaby, we don't always get back what we collect
Really?
because, we may, 20,000 students may not add up, to what we all collect. So I think that, school districts, I don't think it's changed much since I've been on the school board, but school districts really are struggling for funding to have the adequate supports in the classroom, and quite often that comes from having educational assistants or specialist teachers, which are not typically funded outside the per student the per student funding formula.
Interesting. Councillor McPhail, I really appreciate the input, and you have the advantage over many people where you've been a councillor as well, so you understand how all of this financial distribution works, and that's a great contribution for our viewers to be able to glean that information from you. I'm curious about one thing. The schools that are built and these wonderful parklands that are built around the schools here in Richmond, are they owned by the city, or are they owned by is that a fair question, or the Board of Education?
Yes, no, it's actually a really good question, because Richmond is very unique in school districts around the province, in that probably in about, the 1950s, 1960s, when there was the big push for, people were starting to come to Richmond, and a lot of schools were built. If you look around Richmond, many of the schools, you'll see they're built 60s, 70s. And the school district and the city started a program together that they bought parkland together. So many schools you'll see have large parks.
They do.
And half of the park is typically owned by the city. The province of British Columbia, through the Minister of Education, they come out with a formula for a school, the size of the school, and then you need the size of the park or playground. So I think the people who were at the school district and at the city, all those decades ago, came up with a really good idea. I think they leveraged the opportunity for green space for both citizens of Richmond and kids on the playground. So most schools in Richmond today have that shared green space.
That's wonderful, because any schools that I have visited in the last year, I did note that they have all this green space, and I thought, that's very valuable real estate, and I wondered who was responsible for that.
Yes, it is. No, it's and we actually have the city and the school district also have a grass cutting policy, whereby the city cuts all the grass for the school district, and the city then gets some time in space, community space in the school. So it's a good relationship that has worked for decades, and I think that Richmondites can be really proud of all the green space that we have.
Councillor McPhail, I think this has been very informative for our viewers out there. For the candidates that are running, it's critical that they clearly understand the responsibility that they have. It's not just going to a board meeting. They have to understand the business side of things, the distribution of finances. So it is important that you, the viewers, you, the voters, do your research. We will be following, after our interview here with Linda, we will be following up with interviews with all of the candidates who accept our invitation that are running for school trustee. Do your research. Vote for the candidates that you feel are the ones that best suit what you feel is the level of responsibility that you are expecting from these candidates. Well, again, Councillor McPhail, I really appreciate you coming by and giving us your input on all of this, and look forward to hearing more from you, because we will be interviewing councillors next, and you have a volume of wisdom when it comes to that.
Can I just say a few more things, Florence?
You certainly can.
Well,
Please.
I think you've made a really good point about candidates doing their homework, because there is a lot to learn, and it's not saying that you'll if you get elected that you need to know everything. There's certainly staff who can help you, but I think it really behooves the candidates to look at what they're getting into and what they're putting their name forward to. All the school district meetings are available online, so I think that's a good place for candidates to go look at the meetings and see what the discussions are, see what the current hot topics are. Because understanding and being prepared to vote on financial information is really important. I think another really important area that a candidate, to be a successful school trustee, you have to be a good advocate for your community. So you need to know what are the issues at the schools right now, what is a hot topic in the community, and then how would you deal with that? We have MLAs that also represent us at the provincial level. So quite often, we'd meet with them. We'd meet with the Minister of Education, and so these are things where you need to be able to articulate the issues in your community that is happening at your schools. And what I've learned is that unless you're a very skillful communicator, you need to do some homework on that too. You need to be able to share what is going on and articulate, like I said, the issue and what we need from other levels of government to make us successful. Because we all want our young people to be successful in their school education journey.
Of course, of course. Well, ladies and gentlemen, who's viewing this interview, you heard it here first at the Richmond Sentinel, and you're bang on with that, and that's been my philosophy all along, is, make sure you know what you're getting into. It's just not a simple case of attending a monthly meeting. You need to understand the responsibility that you hold in your hands, and I really appreciate you being here today and sharing that knowledge with our viewers. And again, thank you very much. Councillor Linda McPhail, and again, stay tuned, because we will be interviewing the candidates that are running for school trustee.
Well, thank you so much, Florence, and thanks to the Richmond Sentinel for this opportunity to share some of my experience with your viewers.
Thank you.